At the moment, negative headlines are once again dominating our daily news, but there are still plenty of positive news stories from all around the world that hardly ever get covered. For example, did you know that humanity is currently working on developing a new energy source that could radically change life for all of us? You know how generating energy never seems to be a big issue in all those science fiction movies? These futuristic civilizations have come up with something that just seems impossible for us. But the good news is that scientists have now made a huge breakthrough and have come a lot closer to this dream. In addition, researchers have discovered a rare species of coral that has the remarkable ability to survive heat waves. In times of massive coral decline, this could be an extremely important discovery for the protection of our marine life. Let's find out how all of this works. Hi, I'm Regis, and today we take a look at 7 of the best news stories from the past week. We open this episode with a new way to deal with nuclear waste, turning nuclear waste into glass. This could be the solution to a long-standing problem of how to store nuclear waste. In an effort to reduce the dangers of radioactive waste, scientists have found a way to convert it into glass. Yeah, normal glass, like you see in your windows. By combining liquid and solid waste with large glass beads or glass-forming substances, the nuclear materials are turned into large bricks of non-radioactive glass. This process of conversion ensures greater safety and contains the waste, preventing potential leaks over the years. And this is crucial in managing the consequences of unused nuclear weapons. And you might think, well, how much of a problem is this really? Here's some context. The nuclear arms race during the second half of the 20th century produced 56 million gallons of radioactive plutonium from now decommissioned warheads. That's about as much as the world's biggest swimming pool can hold. The problem is that you can't just remove nuclear weapons from existence. They need to be carefully taken apart piece by piece, including the plutonium cores. The US Department of Energy has been trying to deal with this for decades, and the main method of disposing of nuclear materials was using them in fuel rods for civilian nuclear power plants. This prevents nuclear explosions, but the process is slow and quite expensive. The alternative was closer to the truth and involved blending the plutonium with another material and storing it in casks. But these casks only have a projected life of 50 years before they begin to leak, so they had to be buried deep underground. The new approach solves this by eliminating the risk of leaks completely. The glass bricks are stable and fully non-radioactive, which makes them safe to handle and allows them to be safely stored in underground facilities. In another story coming straight out of a science fiction movie, in Lancashire, England, a 10-year-old named Harry got an early Christmas present, a bionic arm from the National Health Service. Born without the lower part of his arm, Harry got fitted for a device in early December by a company that makes 3D printed bionic arms. Before taking the first step to becoming Iron Man, he had to endure a month-long trial to prove that he could actually handle it. After all, with great power comes great responsibility, or gosh, was that another character? Once he passed the trial, Britain's newest superhero got to keep his hand, making him one of the first in the country to have one. This success gives hope to many children and adults alike. And as the technology gets better, more and more people will regain their full potential. And we might have a real-life Tony Stark, too. In the meantime, scientists have found an ingenious way of pushing against another deadly villain, climate change. How? By turning carbon into powder. Yes, you heard that right. With carbon capturing methods, we can now turn that into powder and use it as clean fuel to produce electricity. This discovery took a little more than a century to achieve. The process involves subjecting the CO2, which is notoriously non-reactive and hard to work with, to different catalysts and a chemical process called electrolysis. These experiments result in what is called sodium formate, a powdery substance that could solve one of the biggest problems when it comes to fuels in general: storage. The process itself isn't new, as researchers have previously turned CO2 into fuels. However, back then it required either too much energy or the product was difficult to store on a long-term basis. The new substance can be kept safely on a long-term basis without losing its qualities, without rusting, or without deteriorating in any way. With this powder, we're now closer to achieving one of science's biggest goals: turning captured CO2 into a clean fuel that could replace conventional batteries and store energy for extended periods of time. To further illustrate this, here's an example of an actual use case sometime in the future. Imagine storing the powder in a tank in the basement of your house. Through the use of a fuel cell, it'll be turned into emission-free electricity, which you can now use on demand whenever you feel like it's needed. And when I say whenever, it really means whenever. This stuff can be stored for literal decades, and it's already been tested. The team behind the discovery created a fuel cell the size of a refrigerator, which uses a liquefied version of the powder. This can potentially offer emissions-free electricity for our homes in a few years' time. Do you know what else is free? Hitting the bell and subscribe buttons for more weekly good news from all around the world. It helps us a lot, so thanks in advance. In our next story, we want to talk about a historic moment that took place in the UK just before Christmas, albeit on a more personal scale. The Premier League got its first female referee. On December 23rd, Rebecca Welch became the first female official to direct a match during the clash between Fulham and Burnley, marking a new milestone for women and equality in football. Her journey began when she became the first woman to referee a match from the EFL Championship.
Rebecca Welch has become the first female referee to be appointed to a game in the EFL.
In January 2022, she took charge of a men's FA Cup fixture, and she was also appointed the fourth official for a Premier League match between Manchester United and Fulham. This has solidified her role as a pioneer in men's football. Her appointments to referee matches in the Women's FA Cup final and the Women's World Cup have also helped project her to new heights, promoting her to UEFA's elite category of female referees in 2020. This makes her a real trailblazer in a traditionally all-male profession, and her personal milestones have already paved the way for the next generation of football officials. As such, the Football Association has already pledged to recruit 1,000 new referees from diverse backgrounds in the next 3 years. Now, speaking of plans for the future, Canada has one as well, as our next piece of news shows. The government is now considering implementing a policy that would require car makers to exclusively sell electric vehicles by the year 2035. The new rules will require that 1/5 of vehicles sold in 2026 be either fully electric or plug-in hybrids in order to improve the availability of new electric vehicles across the country. Introduced in 2021 and updated in December, the guidelines represent the federal government's effort to catch up to Europe and the United States in terms of promoting electric vehicle adoption. In contrast to the European Union's plan targeting a 55% reduction in automotive emissions by the end of the decade and zero emissions by 2035.
And we are trying that in 2035, all the new cars that are sold cannot emit CO2 anymore.
Canada faces a considerable challenge based on current sales data. Statistics reveal that just over 10% of new vehicles sold in the first 9 months of 2023 were electric, highlighting a significant gap compared to the 2026 targets. In regions that already have regulations similar to what the federal government has proposed, those figures are higher, however. In 2020, both Quebec and British Columbia quickly exceeded targets for electric vehicle sales, years earlier than expected. Transitioning to zero-emission vehicles is a crucial element of Canada's low-carbon future. The shift will not only help drivers reduce their expenses, but also contributes to maintaining clean air in communities and reducing Canada's impact on the environment in general. Zero-emission future, here we come on board an electric vehicle. Speaking of the environment, things remain hopeful despite concerns about the impact of global warming on coral reefs. As it turns out, some corals have the remarkable ability to withstand marine heat waves by remembering previous events. They memorize what was stressful and can then adjust their response when faced with subsequent warm waves. The species in question is prevalent in the Maorian coral reef in French Polynesia, but finding it was no easy task. Scientists discovered that it demonstrates this ecological memory response to heat waves after a 5-year study in which they examined more than 200 coral colonies. The north shore of Maoria underwent a significant ecological reset in 2010 due to natural disasters, which made it perfect for this task. This is exciting news because it indicates that corals have a greater resilience to climate change than previously assumed. And corals matter a lot. Even though they cover less than 1% of the ocean, these reefs harbor almost a quarter of all marine species and serve as crucial regulators of the sea's CO2 levels. They are immensely important for scientific research, particularly in medicine, and as more and stronger heat waves are expected, their conservation is a key element of fighting the changing climate. Our final story comes with a real bang. Humanity is now closer than ever to achieving nuclear fusion, the process that powers the sun. and using its infinite potential to power up the world. But we need a little backstory for this one. In December 2022, researchers in California achieved the first of several groundbreaking feats. For the first time in world history, a nuclear fusion reaction generated more energy than it consumed. This phenomenon, known as ignition, was successfully replicated at least 3 more times in 2023, offering a glimpse into an exciting future. Nuclear fusion, once the thing of sci-fi novels and movies, has been pursued for decades and, at some point, was even thought impossible. It's the perfect power source, both limitless and clean. Unlike traditional nuclear fission, fusion reactions produce minimal long-lived radioactive waste and pose absolutely no risk of catastrophic meltdowns like at Chernobyl. Establishing fusion energy as one of the main sources of global energy could not only revert climate change, but also propel humanity into the future. To make it possible, the team behind the feat used nearly 200 lasers to target a hydrogen pellet inside a diamond capsule within a gold cylinder. When fired, these lasers trigger rapid explosions and generate energy.
Last week, scientists at the National Ignition Facility achieved fusion ignition. It's the first time it has ever been done in a laboratory.
And even though the amount produced in December of 2022 was modest, these recent successes had the highest yield to date. 3.88 megajoules, or 1 kilowatt per hour, which is enough to power your average TV for 7 hours. Producing even a small amount of energy with this consistency is already promising, as it proves that the first time wasn't just some lucky coincidence. Now, the researchers will have to figure out how to increase the energy produced, while at the same time significantly reducing the cost. That means there's still lots to do before it can meet the scale required for powering electric grids and heating systems. But once it does, it'll be one of the greatest scientific and technological achievements of the 21st century, comparable to the invention of electricity or the moon landing. And you can be sure that someone's probably going to win a Nobel Prize for this one. Along with adaptable corals, carbon powder, and electric cars, fusion energy is yet more good news for us humans. But which of these good news stories are you the most excited about? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this episode of Good News, do us a favor and leave a like and subscribe down below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.